is real. Listen. Hi, I'm Traci.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is Curious Explorers. So, hey, Kath.
Hey, Trace.
Good to see you. It feels like it's been like a decade.
No, we always say that, but I think it's because we're always running around. Like we're
I
always
think
running
so.
places and traveling. Well, we may not be traveling, but
You're traveling.
even that, it's like
I need to get out.
I just there always seems to be something that's rushing, and then we're so excited to talk to each other, but we want to talk to each other in around here so that everybody else can experience the excitement.
Yes,
So
the excitement.
yeah.
So
Woohoo.
I have some exciting stuff for today. I hope you think it's exciting. I hope our listeners do. I'm also excited to see blue behind you. Kind of. It's one of those conflicted things, right? But I like seeing you back in the Paranormal Museum in
Yes,
Asbury Park, New
back at
Jersey.
home.
Well, and all things paranormal, I think that will fit in, of course, with our topic today. You tell me what you think. Um, but I was thinking, like, what did I want to talk about? One of my favorite topics is psychic phenomena and psychic detectives
Mhm.
because I'm fascinated by it. And I want to just say my disclaimers: I'm particularly poorly suited to that work. No one is going to be like Traci should be a psychic detective, although that's what we're going to talk about today.
Mhm.
Um,
Great.
because, as you know, and many of our listeners, a lot of psychics have been used in solving crimes. Law enforcement sometimes is not so forthcoming about that, understandably. And then, if we have time, after I tell you, really, I'm going to focus on one psychic detective that I think a lot of people of a certain era won't have heard of because she's from a bit earlier in the day. I would, I might share a colossal failure of mine to tune into a crime. And so the thing that put the last nail in the coffin of my wanting to do any of that. So
It's a
are
pretty
you shocked?
thankless thing too that, the people who go forward and do this stuff, with, police and whatnot, because you still are getting, the kind of vibe, that, if they're right, they're lucky. You know what I mean? And if something is wrong, that it's proof that they're full of it. So I'm always
Oh my
excited
God.
I've always found it fascinating. I
I
really am
find it
excited to hear what you've got.
so fascinating. So fascinating. So as you and I have talked about, I know a current psychic detective who's excellent, Pam Coronado. And that's somebody people might have heard of
Mhm.
because she's still kind of, visible. The person I'm going to talk about has since passed away, but she, I probably started seeing on these like psychic detective type of TV shows, which were popular in the 90s. This is when I first heard of this woman. So her name is Dorothy Allison. And in a way, she's the
Mhm.
perfect psychic detective because she was the most unassuming looking, like she didn't look like I'm going to show up at the police station and try and solve a crime. The police
Right.
actually reached out to her, but she was otherwise like a mom, a housewife, I believe. So, without further ado, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dorothy Allison. And we'll talk also about something that, there were things she didn't get right, of course. And we can talk about that. Jump in as you see fit. But so, Dorothy Allison, she's also a New Jersey native. And for the people who, we do have a lot of fans in New Jersey, we have
Mhm.
fans all over the world. Shout out to the fans everywhere. But Dorothy Allison was born in, I think, Jersey City. I
Mhm.
have to check that. But she lived in Nutley, New Jersey,
Right.
which is actually not that far from me. So I got some information. She was on Unsolved Mysteries. She was on a lot of other shows back in the day. There was an LA Times article and a Reader's Digest article of
Mhm.
all things. And that's where a lot of this comes from. But the details are pretty consistent across news sources. So Dorothy Allison, one of the things people said in her bio in the LA Times was that in childhood, I guess she had been psychic always, and her neighbors thought she was a witch. They were understanding of that. They're not as specific, those judgy neighbors. But when Dorothy was 14, she had a vision of her father's death and something she shared. And then he died from pneumonia a few weeks later. And I believe he was not ill when she had this
Mhm,
vision. And presumably he was pretty young when this happened. So at some point, like, after that prediction is when she reportedly came to the conclusion that she was a psychic. Now, remember, people weren't talking about this stuff then. There was no internet by far. The internet didn't happen until decades and decades later, but she knew something was different about her. And I'm mentioning the internet thing too, because, a lot of times people say, well, you could look something up. That was not possible
mhm,
for her to like search out information on people or crime, certainly. But her mother supposedly was also pretty psychic, and she may have done more deliberate psychic viewing. It's not entirely clear, but she warned Dorothy that her visions were a gift, but that she should never use her talent for profit.
mhm.
And I think it's interesting because, on the one hand, it's like people need to make a living. She did a ton of psychic work, but to never take payment for it, to me seems more likely that somebody would be genuine and just motivated to do good. But anyway,
And I think that that's why her mother probably said it. Do you know what I like, at the end of the day, it might not have been the actual reason, but I think the idea is if you're profiting from this in some way, there's a negative connotation to that, which of course is absurd because if you can throw a baseball 104 miles an hour, nobody says that's a gift from God and you should give it to humanity. They say pay you for your time. But
they say, how many millions can you make a year?
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and no one has a problem with that. No one has a problem with that if you're a pure soprano. But if you do this, and you and I have always talked about this, the way to me, it's always like you got to pay people for their time. That's it. You have to pay people for their time. But
Yeah,
those people and people who were heavily invested in psychic ability being a God given gift also didn't want to take payment because they believed it was a God-given gift. So it's like God gave this to me in order for me to do this, So it was a
right.
different mindset, but it also was very
Yeah.
self-protective.
Yeah, 100%. And just a little preview, there were people, including some detectives, who said, this woman's a fraud, this is BS, whatever. And you and I have talked about no psychic is 100%. The best ones in the world who have
Yeah.
been evaluated by universities, they're about 85 or so percent accurate, which is
Which
still
is
kind of mind blowing.
phenomenal,
Yeah.
which is crazy accurate.
Yeah. So, with Dorothy Allison, again, this was decades before she was starting this work, decades before people even had heard of this stuff, before the TV shows. So apparently, for more than 30 years, she did use her gift to help police find missing children, to help find criminals that preyed upon them, and so forth. She reportedly amassed a wall full of framed citations from police departments. She never accepted money. And occasionally she would have travel expenses paid for because, of course, she couldn't pay for this. She wasn't bringing in any income. So a police department might pay for travel expenses or give her she might get a fee for appearing on a TV show once in a while to discuss psychic detective work, but generally she did not make any money. So when she must have been about 66, she predicted her own death. I mean, just it's one of the hits she made, unfortunately. But she told her family she wouldn't live to be 75, and this is when she was, I guess, 66. And surely enough, she passed away in Belleville, New Jersey, of heart failure in a hospital at the age of 74. Her birthday was 4 weeks away at the time. But that is not even her most notable psychic work. So she worked on more than 5,000 cases for law enforcement and law enforcement agencies around the globe, not just in the US. She was credited with helping to solve more than a dozen murders and find at least 50 missing children. And by the way, whether you are in very mundane, non psychic law enforcement, I think everybody would agree, or whether you're a psychic detective, probably the hardest and worst cases to work on. I don't think anybody would debate that. So I had seen her on multiple TV shows, again, Unsolved Mysteries. She was this very kind of little old lady looking person by the time that she was profiled on TV. Supposedly, she was a nonstop talker. People said she resembled TV's Edith Bunker character. And she lived a very quiet working class life in Nutley, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And she said, like, I'm not psychic about everything. She said, I can't find my own reading glasses or things that she misplaced. She never pretended to understand her gift, but she disputed the theory that clairvoyance is inherent in all people because she felt like, well, if it were, more people would do
Mhm.
this. This is all from the LA Times profile, but she was a mother of four. So, in many respects, she was a really regular person. She first volunteered her services in 1967, and I don't know how this came about that she perceived this, but she told the Nutley police that she had dreamed of a blonde, blue-eyed boy in a green snowsuit with his shoes on the wrong feet, which is a really weird and specific detail. Both to me, the green snowsuit and having your shoes
Mhm.
on the wrong feet. And she saw him drowned in a pond and his body stuck in a drain pipe. Now, that's awfully specific, and it's awfully specific for a very small geographic area. And sure enough, a month later, a missing boy whose description had not been publicized. So it's not that she made up the story. His body was found in a drain pipe, and his shoes were on the wrong feet. You know,
Mhm.
not sure that's something you just kind of guess or make up. So that was an early kind of hit, and I think started her on this career. And then in 1974, some people won't know this person, but newspaper magnate Randolph Hearst in San Francisco invited Dorothy Allison to help him find his kidnapped daughter, Patricia. So many people have probably heard of the Patty Hearst case, but if you haven't, go look it up.
I
Pretty
named my
famous.
hearse after her, just so
Oh
we're
my god, your
my
hearse is
hearse
the
is
Patty
Patty Hearst.
Hearst
Yeah, that's
instead
why.
of the Patty Hearst.
That's why it's Patty Hearst. That's why that's why we call it Patty Hearst.
Kathy. Kathy, you are one of a kind. My god. Oh my god. Okay. Well, and everybody should check it out. You can see it parked on the street on
Yes,
Cookman
you
Avenue, I
can, you
believe, in
can, you
Asbury Park.
can.
The Patty Hearst,
Patty Hearst,
not to be confused with Patty Hearst.
right.
Um, so Dorothy Allison did not find the young heiress herself, but she called the FBI twice to say she felt Patty was hiding first in Pennsylvania and then in New York City. And both of her feelings proved to be accurate. Dorothy Allison also was correct in predicting that this newspaper heiress, Patty Hearst, would join her captors in robbing a bank. And that is true,
Mhm.
actually. She wound up assisting them with their, committing the robberies with them ultimately. That's a whole longer story, and that's a good psychological kind of episode. So that's one, very Googleable. I'm going to read you two more cases, and I'll touch on a few more. So the next one that was notable and mentioned in the article was the disappearance of Susan Jacobson. So this was 1976, May 15th. So 14-year-old Susan Jacobson left her Staten Island home for an after-school job at a local ice cream parlor, but she never returned home. And at first, and this is not unheard of, law enforcement's dismissed her parents' concerns because, sometimes teenagers disappear, or run away with a friend or a boyfriend, and that's what they thought might have happened. So the Jacobsons felt desperate, as one would imagine they would, and they contacted Dorothy Allison. And then when Dorothy met the Jacobsons, she experienced a disturbing vision, and that often happens too. You're in proximity to somebody, you're tuning into their energy, and that's when the information comes. But her disturbing vision was that Susan had been strangled by her boyfriend. Remember, this 14-year-old girl, so tragic. And Dorothy offered several clues as to where the body would be found. This is crazy to me. And I've heard similar things from like Nancy Orlen Weber, and we could talk about her in another episode. I interviewed her a few months ago on my other podcast, and I've met Nancy. I've taken her classes before. She's a lovely person. But similar to some of the crazy clues that presented for other psychic detectives, Dorothy has these visions. of clues, including an abandoned car, the smell of fuel oil, two smokestacks nearby, and the letters MAR in red spray paint, I guess nearby. So, not surprisingly, it's 1976 too. I'm sure a lot of people were like, this is BS. I'm sure people would be like that now, but law enforcement declined to investigate the clues. And again, remember, abandoned car, smell of fuel oil, two smokestacks, and letters MAR. And in fair this time, it's hard to know what to do with that. So somehow Jacobson's father was able to use these clues to locate a rock, geez, spray painted with the letters MAR at an abandoned World War I shipyard from which two smokestacks and an abandoned car could be seen. And that's where Susan's body was found 2 years later, concealed in two oil drums.
Mm.
And the crime scene evidence pointed to none other than Susan's boyfriend at the time, Dempsey Hawkins, a UK national who was later deported back to England and sentenced to 22 years in prison. But to me, those are pretty crazy. This is really brief, but David Berkowitz, son of Sam, even people who weren't alive then to hear about the case, I was. And I remember it vividly being a kid living in the area. But David Berkowitz, and actually Nancy Orlen Weber and her group also picked up on clues and predicted, like the day before, that David Berkowitz would be found the next day. Nancy actually got his birth name, which I forget what it was, but like that came to her psychically, which is crazy. Again, way pre-internet. But Dorothy Allison was credited with giving an accurate description of the son of Sam killer to a police artist. And she correctly predicted that he would be picked up on a traffic violation. And that's actually what happened.
Parking ticket, I
Um,
think, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like crazy. So this is the case that made me look into Dorothy Allison further because, I'd seen her on TV a long time ago. I'd forgotten a lot of the details, but Dorothy Allison provided accurate and unique clues about a man named John DeMars. So in 1974, December 20th, 1974, 30-year-old John DeMars, who was a happily married father of two and a banker working in New York City, and he lived in Nutley as well. But on December 20th, 1974, right before Christmas, he boarded a train in the evening, a commuter train to come home to Nutley. But when the train stopped in Nutley, DeMars was nowhere to be found. And the two police theories at first were that either he was a victim of foul play
Mhm.
or that he had voluntarily disappeared. And again, sometimes people do
That's
voluntarily
what
disappear,
that's what you would think. Yeah, mhm.
or somebody has they're having an affair, or,
Yeah, they
they
got
want,
scared of something, they got tired of life, and they took off.
running from a debt or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But after several attempts to locate him by authorities, the police actually reached out to Dorothy and they brought her in, and they knew she had helped solve a number of other crimes, and missing persons cases and so forth. So even then, Dorothy's detractors, would say, well, this is BS. She's a fraud. This isn't possible. However, she was pretty spot on about this. And the police being at their wits' end, they finally reach out to Dorothy, and Dorothy tunes in and tells them she sees him in her mind. And she sees John DeMars falling from the train into the water below and subsequently drowning. But that's not all she sees. She can't pinpoint exactly where this happens. And, a lot of times you're getting pieces of a puzzle, you're not getting the whole picture, usually. She could tell them that he fell into the water in an area where she saw a bow and arrow, which is a crazy, weird detail that makes no sense. And she also said she saw the numbers 222, so three twos. Police couldn't figure out what all this information meant, understandably. But 2 months later, on February 22nd, which is 222
Right.
or three twos, John DeMar's body showed up in shallow water in the Passaic River, which runs along the train line. I mean, in a massive body of water. They're like very long, and I can understand why it didn't show up for a little bit. But right next to his body, they found an arrow, and the arrow belonged to a man who was bow hunting with his son in that area. And what the police think happened, and I don't think anybody really knows, is that John DeMars, is commuting home at night. He'd fallen asleep on the train. And when the conductor made an unscheduled stop that day, it was along the Passaic River, and it was by the Passaic River Bridge. And they think that he was half asleep still. He stepped off the train and
Right,
somehow fell off the bridge and drowned. But
right.
that's crazy to me.
Mhm.
Like the bow and arrow thing, like even if you think, like, I don't know how you would even conclude that he had fallen in the water, but okay. But the bow and arrow and the 222, I don't know.
It's also utterly useless. You know what I mean? Like, the only
100%.
thing that is and that's where you start getting into that conversation, right? Because it's like, I'm not
Yeah.
a psychic to solve, like, it's not like it's a scalpel, where it's gonna be precision, it's gonna be this. You never know what's gonna be useful. It's more like, you're more like an antenna, and you're pulling in lots of different stuff. Some of it's going to be useful, some of it's not. Even the idea that she said February 22nd, well, was that predictive or was that psychic? And how was that remotely helpful? You know what I mean? So it's like, we look at these cases and we only judge their value as far as if they lead to the solution of it.
Yeah.
But that's not what the data is showing us. The data is showing us that these big events that happen, that we connect, that psychics can connect with, really, it's just evidence that we're more interconnected, and that psychic
100%.
because as far as useful data, oftentimes it's only useful in retrospect, or it's only even validatable in
Right.
retrospect,
100%. 100%.
Interesting.
But what's so interesting to me is, again, like you and I have talked about this before. Like, I think natural psychics pick up on that information, either that's to come, or that's just ambient and out there somewhere, or that's in the past. And it's like, it is like kind of just inadvertently tuning into a radio station
Yeah.
and hearing that music.
Little noise, it's a little noise that you have constantly back there, and you get some of that data that
Yeah.
pops in.
But the interesting thing is, like, and again, I don't even have a case to present of Pam's, but we could invite her on the show. She might come on. I know she's really busy, but
I'm a huge fan of hers, by the
I
way.
did not really know that.
Such a huge fan of hers. Always thought she had that TV show,
Psychic
Psychic
detectives.
Detectives, with another psychic, Lori.
I forget.
Yeah,
Yes, Lori the medium.
I just remember Pam being so convincing, and the because she wasn't 100%. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, "Oh, you go here, you make
She's
a
so
left."
matter of fact, though, too.
So
She's
matter of
like,
fact,
oh,
and
it's
she would just
this.
say, "I'm not getting that clear. This is what I think it is." And really what she was saying was, "I'm being presented with a couple of different options. This one seems stronger to me." So, and I actually think that that's probably the way psychic phenomena appears to people. And the difference between someone who is psychically gifted, the way we talk about like a pitcher being gifted, right? Everybody can throw a baseball, five people can throw it 105 miles an hour. Like that's how it is. That it's being able to say, I have all of this. This is louder. And I
Yeah.
do think that, and then with the different training and the different ability to kind of fine tune it, I always found Pam to be completely believable. She was one of the few people, and I do know Dorothy Allison. I remember a couple of her cases. I grew up two towns over. I remember a little girl disappearing from a mall, I think. And I can't, but I do remember her being very, very compelling as well. But you grow up reading about these things, and maybe you saw that and on sightings, and maybe you saw it on That's Incredible, and maybe you
Oh,
saw it on
yeah.
those kinds of things, or
I love
National
sightings.
Geographic, or some of the other things that, the three channels that we had, you saw it. But when Pam's show came on, um and we're talking about like 25 years ago at this
Oh my
point,
God.
20,
Yeah.
25 years ago, I I thought she was And you know me, I'm so skeptical.
Oh my
And I
god.
am so
You're a tough
I
cookie.
am
I would
so
not wanna read for you.
annoyingly skeptical, because I was in television for a long time. Um, I she really I always thought she was one one person that I found to be utterly convincing. I mean, just utterly convincing.
So I wanna tell you a little bit about Pam because, some people may know, and again, I'm not a professional psychic. I'm a natural psychic, I think, and I feel like weird even saying that, but just in terms of the amount of and many people are,
No,
you
you
pick up
invest
stuff.
you devote time to the development of that. So that's,
Yeah.
you've taken your natural ability and you're interested in it.
I am interested
Yeah.
in it. I like teaching people about it. I think it's good for just everyday life
Mhm.
and getting clear on what's intuition and what's mental noise and what's our worries and our hopes and fears and all that. Cause I think that's a valuable skill to have.
Agreed.
But years ago, I took a bunch of different classes with Pam. And I reached out and searched for her because I'd seen the shows and she seems like somebody who'd be nice and she's quite nice. But so I took, I think, like, beginning and intermediate and maybe more of that. I don't even remember, like, a remote viewing with her then, and it's less intense than the military stuff, but it's very approachable,
Mhm.
and it's just a good skill to have, honestly. But it's also I took beginning and intermediate psychic detective classes with her, and I took a mediumship class with her and photo reading and stuff like that. She's got a bunch of, like, short-term classes. Some are like a one day or a few hours or whatever, and it's worth checking out because 'cause they're also very affordable. But it's like weeks of practice targets and class work, and I'm just saying I know what my strengths are, and I know what, for a variety of reasons, I should not do. God, getting, like, all freaked out as I say it because I remember, like, some of the exercises would be like you're presented with 2 different photos and you tune in and which person has the propensity to be violent, right? It's crimes.
Mhm.
And Pam is uniquely able to compartmentalize. I am not. And I learned that, but I was going to tell you about a case. This is kind of the true crime portion of the episode. So I'm going to give people a little trigger warning that I'm going to tell you about the case that I completely was unable to tune into, and I kind of have a sense why. It is on the more gruesome side. It does not involve children. It does not involve animals, but it's a rather gruesome true crime thing. Are you okay with me sharing this,
Uh,
Kathy?
I compartmentalize very well too.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
fine, yeah, fine.
I don't. Like, I
No, I
like,
know,
this case gave me
yeah,
nightmares.
I that doesn't
Like,
happen to me. Which is
okay,
not to
all
say
right.
that I don't love kids and I don't love people and everything like that, but I can be very, clinical when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, no, and more power to you. Like, and the reason Pam can do this work is because she has various techniques for distancing herself
Right.
emotionally from what she's observing, whereas I feel like I kind of become part of
Yeah,
it
I
in a
remember she was it was almost like she was like, "I'm on this road and I'm gonna split off over here." Do you know what I mean? Like, she could
yeah,
literally take a portion of herself and go there, leave that other part on the other road and kinda go into just from
yeah.
what I remember from the shows that she, that she was it Sensing Murder? Was that
Yes, yes,
Sensing
yes,
Murder?
yes. She's been on a bunch of
Yeah,
them,
but that was the
but
one.
that was the
Yeah, that was
series.
the one.
Yes, everybody Google it and check it out.
It's
I'm sure you
so
can still
good,
get it on
so
YouTube.
good, watch it.
Yes, and just so you know, like, everybody, even in a specific type of psychic work, like psychic detective work, there are things different people are good at. Like,
Right,
Pam has trained herself to use, like, the image of a clock to tell, like, in relation to where you are psychically standing, where maybe a body is located or
right.
something else.
Mhm,
She's trained herself to be really good at identifying the make and model of cars,
right.
which I
I
completely
remember
am
she was
like,
really about colors too. Like, she would always
yes.
get colors, I remember that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you wanna find a car and get
That's
the police
super
on the right
important, yeah.
track, you gotta
Mhm.
be able to do that, and maybe sketch it and so forth. So anyway, again and again, we have these pictures of people who's got the predisposition to be violent or has a history of being violent. Now, just so you know, sometimes the picture of the person who's quote, not the person she means, might also have had a
Right.
predisposition to be violent. And so in this case, one of the people, like I felt like I could tune into him and I felt like this person had a potential to be like violent, like aggressive, if he was, under the influence or felt like he had been wronged or gotten in an argument, but it wasn't anything crazy. When I tuned into the other person, this is the only time this has ever happened. It's crazy. I saw complete blankness. It was like a white screen, which I've never had happen since. And I heard like angelic music, which was crazy. I was like, I don't know what this means. But my thinking brain was like, this must mean that this is a really good person. I just wrote down what I got. We're in class. And by the way, there were certain people who were like amazing and could tell you about the most horrific stuff. And it like was just like describing, the color of a car.
Mhm.
So when we found out who the violent person was in this example, and again, I'd been right on a bunch of the others. Like, I don't think I got any of the other ones wrong.
Mhm.
This one was so wrong. I was like, this is my sign for I shouldn't do this. So, if it's okay, I'm going to read you
Yeah.
something from the news article. Again, if anybody else feels like they're especially sensitive, you might want to tune out. So, this was in 2013. So, this is the Cook County Criminal Courthouse, I guess, is where this person was arraigned and I guess prosecuted. It's actually hard for me to even read this. So, there's a Chicago teen who murdered and mutilated his aunt's live-in boyfriend on Christmas Day and then left his head and other body parts in her bed because he wanted to leave his aunt a present. So basically, the person who committed this crime was 18-year-old Alexis Valdez. He lived with his aunt and his aunt's boyfriend. Silvestre Diaz Hernandez is the boyfriend. He was 41 years old. So the police went to the home that the three people shared early Christmas Day because Alexis Valdez called 911 to report a dead body in the house. And when the operator asked him if he had tried performing CPR on the victim, which they're supposed to ask, Valdez laughed and said the body had been decapitated. So, right there, not a good sign.
Yeah. Good one.
Understatement.
Good
Yeah.
one.
Imagine being that 911 operator.
That was
That
like,
had to be a really rough
"No,
day.
headless."
You know, like I can't even.
Mhm.
I would have quit that job too. So, not suited for that job either. So, the police arrive at the scene. This is Christmas Day, 2013, I guess, and they find Alexis Valdez, who's again 18 years old, covered in blood on the home's front porch. And when they ask him what's going on, he said, "Shouldn't you arrest me before you ask me questions? Because I just killed a man and he's in the basement." So, I'm going to just tell you, even before I read the details, because there's more, I felt like overwhelmed by this information. Like I just thought, "Oh, like and why didn't I tune into it?" And I have thoughts about it, and Pam and I talked about it, but he then had it I guess he was holding an iPad and he slammed it on the ground, shattering the screen. I don't even know what the significance of that is, but so the prosecutors said that basically Valdez lived in his aunt's house, again with her and her then boyfriend. The aunt was upset with Valdez because he was supposed to work. She wanted him to work, get a job, help pay the household
Mhm.
expenses, but he didn't. And that led to understandable tension in the home. So then the aunt said, you know what, this is too much, and asked him to move out. Again, understandably.
Mhm.
And I don't know why he was living with the aunt versus other family or anyone else, but so it's Christmas Eve and the aunt goes to a party, and her boyfriend went to visit his family. So Alexis Valdez stays in the apartment. He has not yet moved out and he's drinking. He's drinking all day, I guess. And I guess he got angry about having to move out of the apartment or the house. So when the boyfriend returns home, he found that Valdez had drunk all of the beer in the home. So he said, let's go and we got to go to the store and get more beer. So the two of them actually leave and they go to a drugstore to buy more beer, which they do. So there I mean, I guess it seems like everything is fine enough because the 2 of them leave the house together, go get more beer and whatever. But before they had left the house, I guess Valdez had found a hammer and hidden it by the front door. And when they got home, he bludgeoned the boyfriend in the head. Is this okay if I read the details? I'm
Yeah,
just giving
for
people
me,
another
it's
trigger.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for me, it's fine.
Okay. Okay. So Valdez then covers the windows of the house and plays loud music. So he's of sound enough mind to do this. I don't think he's of sound mind, but he gouged out the boyfriend's eyeballs with his fingers and then cut off the man's ears, nose, mouth, arm, head, and hand with a knife and saw. And then he, like, arranged them on his aunt's bed because he wanted to leave his aunt a present, he said. And then he said later that I guess he later told police he would have killed the aunt too if she had found her boyfriend's body. The aunt is probably not that old either. The aunt's probably in her
Yeah,
30s or
30s,
40,
yeah, mhm.
and it's somehow taking care of a sibling's son who does this. But I guess Valdez became tired from mutilating the boyfriend, and then he called. I mean, that's what they're saying, and I guess it's a lot of work. And he called 911 himself.
And he was
So
drinking all
they
day too, so
and he was drinking all day. But you know what? Like, let me just say, most people, if they drink all day, want to not do stuff. They'll
no, that's what I'm
probably
saying,
pass
like, when
out
he got
or
tired, you know?
vomit.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that was
I
it.
have a drink,
So
I'm exhausted, so I can't
yeah, like I'm like, I gotta go upstairs to bed.
yeah.
I'm not thinking about murder and dismemberment. So, but everybody's different. So he calls 911. The police find the boyfriend's body in the basement and they discover a knife at the scene. I mean, and obviously this kid confesses to the crime. He was arrested, held without bail, probably good. But the neighbors, I love how the neighbors always weigh in like, oh, it's just a normally
It's a
quiet street.
nice
Yeah, because
place,
that doesn't normally happen
right,
anywhere.
right.
Like, but I guess neighbors said that the boyfriend and the nephew used to go outside and fight sometimes. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's just arguing, but anywho, so that was my big failure at tuning in, and I was so overwhelmed by just reading about this story at the time. This has to be like, it's got to be like 2015 or something when we did this exercise. And literally, that was my clue not to go further with this because I just thought, you know what? Like,
Where do you think the
I,
angelic music came from?
so
Do you think it was kinda like your higher power protecting you?
I, so I don't, because there was another time where I had an angelic experience, which is much more pleasant than this
Right.
tuning in
No, I
would have been.
remember you talking about that,
Yeah. So I think it was my psyche's way, like, just I feel like psychically, I probably did have
yeah.
access
Mhm. So, like, "La, la,
to
la, 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 la," like, you know? Yeah,
exactly,
mhm,
exactly, because it's the only time where I've had that experience where it's just blank, white, can't perceive
mhm.
anything,
And then you
and
interpreted it.
yeah, so
Right.
my rational mind said, "Oh, this must be an exceptionally good
Yeah, no,
person
this guy's a saint.
because I'm not getting anything and I'm hearing angelic music,"
Yeah.
but it didn't feel like it was
Right, right,
angelic
right, right, right,
music.
right.
I think you're exactly right. It was like plugging your
Right,
ears
mhm.
and
So, like,
making that
"Nothing
sound,
to see here," you know?
going, to my
Mhm.
safe place inside, and yeah. But all that is to say, nobody is getting almost nobody is ever getting the newspaper article degree of detail,
Right,
Sometimes the details, as you said, are details that will not lead to the solving of crime, but the recognition of, oh, this information is discernible before it's discovered.
right.
And nobody, and I don't know why,
And
but
I'm not sure that that information comes to the psychic for any reason other than that they want to help, but, they're open to it, and so it comes in, and they may not even, they don't know what's gonna be helpful either, and I think I've told you about Frank St. James. I think that's
Yes,
probably the best.
but I think our listeners would love to hear about him.
So Frank St. James is a very well-known, New Jersey and New York psychic. He passed away 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was probably 3 years ago. But he did work with me at, Paranormal, Museum, and he was a resident psychic here. And Frank was, I think he went by, like I think he went by, like, police detective, like psychic police detective or something. He really prided himself on his work, the work that he did on two fronts. One was um, a connection to Egyptian history and archaeological digs and things like that. And he was very, very devoted to that. And the other was the work that he did in psychic detectives. And he was featured on lots of shows, but also he did work with local police. He was on PLJ. He was actually it was actually very cute. And
Because the name is so familiar too. I
well,
think a lot of people would recognize the name even if they didn't make
yeah,
the
and I will
connection.
say, like, he was older when he passed away. I think he was 85 years old when he died. And I've had some I can't say that Frank and I were friends, like I don't know that I knew him all that well. He worked here for a couple of years, but it wasn't years that I was really at the shop all that much. And I don't know that our personalities really kind of vibed, but we liked each other well enough. Frank liked to tell me how I should do things. Like,
I
what
don't
you
even
should have
like to
done.
do
You
that.
know what you should have done. And I was always just like, yeah, you should be quiet. But we got along fine. Like we got along fine. The one thing that I loved about Frank was how much he loved his wife. Like he just absolutely loved his wife, and her name was Anna. And I think I played for you a couple of things that happened after he passed
Oh,
away.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really, really compelling. But when he died, Anna passed away. And she had been sick the entire time that I knew Frank. So Anna passed away. And I will say the sun shone out of her eyes for Frank. Like that was it. She was his sun, she was his moon, she was the breath in his lungs. He adored her. And that was always nice to see. It was nice to be like, oh, there are relationships like that. That was great. And so I was not surprised to hear that just a couple months after Anna had passed away, that Frank had passed away. Frank was not sick. He didn't have ailments, but his reason for being on this earth was tied to Anna. So when Anna passed away, it was not unexpected that Frank died soon afterwards. And I think Frank would say I had a good run. I was 86 years old, 85 years old, and I had a good run. I think he would look at it that way. And so we had gotten a call at the shop from his stepdaughter, who had only ever really known Frank as her father. So as far as she was concerned, he was not her stepfather, he was her dad. And she said, he's got this collection of all of his cases, and I don't want to throw this stuff out. you know, he left a note to leave it to you. Now, where I was at in my personal life at that point was just like, I don't need any more crap in my life. Like I don't but there was a part of me that was very appreciative of that, and also knew that where I was at in my life at that time was going to be transitional, and that I would
Yeah.
regret it if I didn't, honor this gift. And so I sent somebody to go pick it up. And stuff came in with it that was really strange, very unusual, but it sat in our isolation chamber for about a year. And about 18 months ago, maybe a little bit less than that, I was like, let's pull it up and take a look at what's in there. And what astonished me was um, there were all of his police cases still in there,
Oh, wow.
all of the things that he'd worked on, and in his files. And the one thing that really really knocked my socks off was there were cases in there that he had worked on for 30 years. And you could see where he started in the early 90s, and it was handwritten stuff. And then he got into the late 90s and there were map quests, and then he got into the early aughts and
Okay.
it was Google Maps and things like that. So you could see how he was using this stuff. And how this stuff stayed with him, like, and he would check in with certain detectives or, make a note, call the detective in Long Branch and for years. So the idea that, that these are casual experiences for psychics is to me was really driven home by how committed, how much time and effort he committed to the information that he was getting for decades. You know what I mean? So when you look at someone like
Yeah.
Pam, this is not something like she just wakes up and it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna devote 15 minutes to it. Oh, I think I found a murderer." Like, it's not like that. It's stuff that they work on, stuff that they commit themselves to, stuff that they hone skills so that information is
1000%.
accurate and that it's really important to them.
So a little bit of trivia about Pam is, and if she comes on the show, and I will, if people weigh in and leave comments that they would like us to interview Pam, go to our YouTube channel at Curious
If you
Explorers
wanna see
Show.
me fangirl, because I'll be like, "No, whatever you say, Pam, whatever, that's fine."
You should take a class or 2 with her, because it's very laid back.
Yeah.
But, Pam, started out because she had a dream about a missing persons case where the spirit of the person came and showed her
Mhm.
what happened. And I'd rather let her tell the story if
Right.
she comes on. It's good enough reason to get her to come on the show, but that kind of led her to study with a woman named Bevy Jagers, and people could look her up too. If I find anything, I'll put a link to that, and I'll put a link to the articles I referenced before too. But Bevy Jagers was like a not well known outside of that realm, but she is very well known in that very specific realm, and she really taught Pam how to tune in and be disciplined and how to get very specific. And I think for people who want who have some latent ability or want to see if they do and develop it, there are ways for people to learn how to tune in and get their emotional stuff out of the way. And honestly, you're not of any use if you're just randomly picking up on stuff. I mean, for the most part, like I don't know that Dorothy Allison was trained. I think she just got enough stuff, not randomly, but you know what I mean, where it just kind of happened to her. But so people like Pam, people like Frank St. James, other people, it's like they take a natural ability and like you just said, they work at
Yeah,
it,
they
they
work
hone
at
it,
it,
they
yeah.
get
Mhm.
better, they see what works, and they see what they need to practice on. And they also, I think, know the stuff that they are better at and the stuff that they are less accurate at, even though compared to most people, they're probably quite a bit more accurate. But I wanna give a shout out too, because for very little, people can take my psychic development, self-paced course. It's my like, I rarely plug it, so we can cut that out.
Oh, that's
It
fine.
um, but it is trainable, and you don't have to wanna be a professional psychic to do this. I
And
feel
part
like
of
the
it is
psychic
learning
detective
what
stuff,
part of
a
it
whole
is
other
Oh,
level.
yeah, absolutely. Part of what you learn is what to not listen to, right? So
Oh
so,
my
like,
god.
how to kind of and you know this, like, when I've done seances or something like that, I always talk to people about, like, "This is what I hear, and this is why this information comes through." So, if if I ask you which direction to go in, tell me. Like, don't
Yeah,
test me. Because we're not here generally to be for you to test me, and to me, it's like anything else. When they're looking at something, they want to everything is probably somewhat loud, but they want to tone down the noise that's not going to be useful. So that's harder. That is so much harder than picking up on stuff. You pick up on stuff all the time, right? The question is which stuff do I listen to and which stuff do I turn down? And I think that, that's something where being trained kind of allows you because if you're not listening to all of the other noise, you are by definition amplifying the channel that you need to amplify, and that's going to
that's a good point.
increase your accuracy, and that's going to increase your skill set. It's also going to increase your confidence, and confidence is a huge, it's a huge part of psychic phenomena.
Confidence, but with setting your ego
Oh,
aside, and I
absolutely.
feel like that is,
Mhm.
like
Well,
there's a
Joey,
real
mine's
art to
like
that.
faith, you know, and without religion.
That's great.
I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm talking about just kinda like trust. To
That
me, trust is
it's
better.
yeah,
Trust is better, you
100%,
know, where you're like,
100%.
"I'm gonna trust that this has meaning, and I'm not gonna feel it has nothing to do with me." I always used to say, "Turn yourself into a goldfish. It comes in, it goes out, and it's not your place to decide what's valuable and what's not."
No, I mean, you might pick up on somebody's corn salad at their family reunion.
Which is a very important, data in salad.
If you, don't know the reference, please go watch some of our old episodes
Corn
because that's still it's the weird stuff and the unlikely
that's
stuff that
yeah.
often turns out to be, like, the big stuff. And honestly, like Dorothy Allison with the bow and arrow next
Yeah,
to somebody's body,
but you
like,
know what?
seriously?
It didn't do anything.
Passaic isn't really known for its bow hunting, I don't
Right.
think.
Well, it is known though.
Is
I
it?
wasn't sure where that was going to pop in, but it is obviously. I thought, well, was it an archaeological site? You know, because
Oh,
there is a
interesting.
lot of stuff along the river and everything. But like the bow and arrow did nothing to solve the nothing. It did nothing. But
Absolutely.
what it might have done was made the police officers more likely to
To
be
listen to her.
receptive. You know what I
And
mean?
next time.
So and, I don't think that that's like I don't think that that was the reason why she got the information, but that is an ancillary result. It is like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
here's the data. The data was accurate. So maybe they'll be more likely to be open themselves if another psychic comes up with something that is actionable.
Honestly, maybe it's also and who knows, but it was to help her learn to trust
Yeah. Yeah.
the
No,
information that comes through
and
because that's a crazy
whether that
detail.
was its intention, that may have been its result, regardless of whether it was intended that
100%.
way. Yeah.
So, lovely
Beloveds.
beloveds, please do leave us a comment on YouTube, seriously, because that's really the best place. I mean, you can also reach out on our website, which is curious-explorers.com. I think it's a hyphen and not a dash, but you'll see it'll come up. But on YouTube at Curious Explorers Show, you can absolutely leave us a comment, but we want to know what you want to hear more of. And if you want us to invite Pam, I don't know, she's super busy, but if you want us to invite Pam on the show, leave a comment because I'll actually reach out to Pam and be like, Pam, there are all these comments, people. And then, and then Kathy can check something off of her bucket list.
Yes,
So
please,
do it for
please,
Kathy.
for crying out loud. Do a sister a solid.
But Kat, thank you for letting me share about Dorothy Allison. I forgot she was, in your neighborhood
Right, yeah. Well, no,
practically.
thank you for reminding me. She was definitely one of the people that got me interested at a young age, and it's
Yeah.
funny because you referenced Reader's Digest.
Yeah.
That was a bit Reader's Digest, Life magazine, these were all, periodicals that were, influential at that time because
Yeah.
they were coffee table, literature, right? That's
Yeah.
what people were reading. And so, I remember her in Reader's Digest, and the Reader's Digest was before my time, but I remember going to the library and reading that stuff and finding that stuff. So, thank you for that, throwback to kind of one of the many things that got me interested in the subject matter.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, beloveds, I think that'll be it for this episode. But again, if you enjoyed it, please remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
Bye for now. I know that the paranormal is real. Listen. You've just listened to the Curious Explorers podcast with the Kathy Kelly and Tracy Stein. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
real. The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real. It is real.